Good evening. What I'm about to share happened in 2015. I have a friend, Lucas, whose father owns a farm in a small village, about 25 kilometers from our city. The farm itself is about 7 kilometers from that village, nestled in a rural area. I met Lucas in 2009, and he always told me that his father had acquired the property around 1995. At that time, Lucas was still a child, and his parents were married. The farm was bought for the family, who spent weekends there. He described that at the time the farm had a cozy, rustic-style house, but very well built, with a swimming pool and an adjacent recreation area. When his parents were together, he and his sister, still young, frequented the place a lot, bringing relatives and friends, and the family gathered there regularly. The extent of the property was considerable, and the main residence was in the center of a vast plot of land. There was a neighboring house belonging to the caretaker, located about 150 meters from the main dwelling. The farm also had a soccer field and an extensive eucalyptus plantation covering a good part of the plot. One time, Lucas narrated a very peculiar episode that occurred on the farm. He, his sister, their parents, and some relatives were there. It was the transition from a Sunday to a Monday. Suddenly, an entity began to strike the door of the residence forcefully. Everyone woke up startled and ran to the living room. The creature resembled a beast, determined to invade the house but without success. It continued to strike the door and growl while moving around the house, looking for a breach. Terror seized everyone, but fortunately, the beast failed to enter. At dawn, still quite frightened, they left. The caretaker also became alarmed and the next day returned to his home. At dawn, he no longer wanted to stay on the farm and left. Since then, neither Lucas's mother, nor he, nor his sister, nor his father returned to the property. Lucas's father, however, still visits it during the day, but never dared to spend the night there even 4 years after the incident. Time flowed, and Lucas's parents divorced. The farm consequently fell into disuse. His father occasionally goes there only for a daytime inspection, but never considered selling the property, as he holds countless memories of his married life there. However, the place is falling into ruin. The pool cracked, the walls of the leisure area collapsed, and the only structure that remains in good condition is the house. Lucas's father, although he never contemplated selling the property, never again had the courage to stay there at night. One day, I challenged Lucas, suggesting that we spend a night on that farm. Lucas hesitated, declaring that he wouldn't go, but that he would lend the property if I wanted to stay there overnight. He instructed me to pick up the farm key from his grandmother, who lived in the adjacent locality. I drove there with my friend Emerson, and we got the key. Upon arriving at Lucas's grandmother's house, she greeted us with a certain reservation and warned us about the existence of something peculiar on the farm, recommending caution. Still, we continued the journey to the property. We arrived at night, and it was already completely dark. We had difficulty locating the entrance to the farm, as the dirt road was full of eucalyptus trees that obstructed visibility. Finally, we managed to reach the house and turn on the lights. I called my friend Emerson and we settled in. The farm was modest but well maintained. We set up our belongings and started drinking and listening to music on the porch. There was no internet connection, but we managed to entertain ourselves a bit, and around 1 a.m. we decided to rest. When we were already lying down, around 3:30 a.m., I noticed a noise coming from outside, near the window. I became alert, not knowing the source of the sound. Soon the noise intensified, as if something was trying to break down the living room door. The blow was so vehement that it woke Emerson. I quickly locked the door, but the commotion outside did not cease. We continued to hear growls and footsteps, circling the house. It seemed that the creature longed to enter. The situation worsened when the entity struck the kitchen door, at the back, continuing with its grunts and footsteps. I was already in despair, convinced that we would not be able to escape. The uproar lasted until about 4 a.m. and then ceased. We remained silent for a long period and finally managed to fall asleep until dawn. As soon as the day broke, we ran out of the farm and headed to Lucas's grandmother's house, where we returned the key. She merely uttered, "I warned you, that place is hopeless." I explained what had happened, and she just shook her head, showing no surprise. Back in the city, I called Lucas and narrated what had happened. He laughed and exclaimed, "Who's the scaredy cat now?" Since then, the farm has become even more desolate, with the creature still roaming the place. Lucas's father still visits it occasionally, but at night the farm remains uninhabited, and perhaps this thing roams the house, even when it is empty. Good night. Hello, my name is Julia. I am passionate about nature trails, and on a particular weekend, I organized a group of friends for an extensive hike through the forest surrounding our city. We were all euphoric about the idea of spending the day outdoors, enjoying the stunning natural beauty that surrounded us. We began our journey at sunrise, each equipped with backpacks containing food, water, and camping gear. The forest was lush and vibrant, with a vast diversity of fauna and flora surrounding us. As the day progressed, we explored winding paths and crossed clear streams. We talked and laughed as we walked, sharing stories and experiences. It was a day of camaraderie and deep connection with nature, which we would never forget. However, as the sun began to set on the horizon and night approached swiftly, we realized the need to start preparing for the return. The daytime heat gave way to a refreshing breeze, and the forest began to envelop itself in a halo of enigma and gloom. We decided to take a shortcut that, we imagined, would lead us back to the starting point more quickly. As we advanced along the narrow path, the silence of the forest began to disturb us. It was then that I heard terrifying howls echoing through the woods, making our hearts pound in our chests. We exchanged apprehensive glances, aware that we were being watched by something unknown, and one of us even murmured, "Could it be a werewolf?" It was the last thing I wanted to hear. I involuntarily trembled, remembering the old narratives about these types of supernatural beings that haunted the woods. However, there was no time to let fear paralyze us. We needed to find a way to emerge from the forest before it was too late. We chose to continue walking as a group, maintaining serenity and avoiding any noise that might attract the attention of that entity. We continued to advance cautiously, using our flashlights to illuminate the path ahead. While we moved through the darkness, keeping a vigilant eye and keen ears for any sign of the werewolf, we felt the tension in the air grow with each step. Every crack of a branch and those distant howls made us shrink, but we continued, determined to get out of the forest alive. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we spotted a faint light from the flashlights that signaled the end of the trail. With a collective sigh of relief, we quickened our pace, running towards the safety of the campsite. As we emerged from the forest, all breathless and sweaty, but grateful to be safe and sound, we embraced, sharing a sense of relief. That night, as we gathered around the campfire at the campsite, sharing the experience we had just lived, we all remained apprehensive, imagining that creature might still invade our refuge. However, by divine grace, this did not happen, and I believe it was due to our campfire which drove that entity away. Good night. So before you get all comfy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's story. Good evening. My account is similar to most, but I, thank God, saw nothing, only heard, and it was horrible. I live in the interior of São Paulo near a forest. It was Lent, at the height of the pandemic. The streets were completely empty and without cars passing. I was lying in my bed, it must have been around 1 a.m., until I heard a very different howl coming from the direction of the corner of the house. It sounded like people, but at the same time not, because immediately after the end of the first howl, all the neighborhood dogs began to howl together. It was a bizarre thing, including my dogs at the time, and my old neighbor's dogs also howled. At that moment, I was already paying attention, with my ears perked up. Suddenly, a deadly silence, the kind that becomes unsettling. I was completely bewildered until I heard something running fast. It was a trot, a gallop on 2 legs. The creature was so strong that I felt the vibration coming from the wall to my bed. At that moment, I ran to the bathroom and hid because I thought it was going to jump through my window. At the time, no one on this street had a camera. I slid the bolt and stayed there hidden in the bathroom. I will never forget this. I heard the howls and the vibration in my room all the way to my bed. I believe these things are loose during Lent. There were only a few days left until Holy Week, and days later it happened. My friends still tease me today when I tell this story, but only God knows the fear I have of waking up in the middle of the night, looking out the window, and seeing a huge black dog standing on two legs looking at me. Good night. Good evening. My name is Beto. I will tell a story that happened 8 years ago. At that time, I had recently separated from my wife, and my son named Lucas had just turned 12. I decided it was time to take him on an outdoor adventure. We both had always been passionate about nature, so we chose a farm hotel with a camping area nearby. The farm promised an authentic experience, with trails, fishing, and direct contact with animals. We arrived on a sunny morning and were warmly welcomed by the farm owner, Mr. Alfredo. He was a middle-aged man, with already graying hair and a nice, enigmatic look. He showed us the camping area, which was a short walk from the main lodge. Lucas was excited about the idea of sleeping under the stars, and we quickly set up our tent. The first few nights were peaceful. We spent the days exploring the farm, fishing in the lake, and hiking through the surrounding woods. But on the third night, however, something strange began to happen. I woke up in the middle of the night, and through the small opening of the tent, I saw Mr. Alfredo leaving the lodge on foot. He seemed very cautious, looking all around before disappearing into the darkness. I found it curious, but attributed it to some personal routine of his and went back to sleep. On the second night, we were surprised by a terrifying roar coming from the forest. A colossal creature had attacked the farm. The guests and campers all ran desperately to the main house, seeking refuge. We managed to lock the doors and windows and spent the rest of the night on vigil, listening to the terrifying sounds the creature made outside. The next day, Mr. Alfredo acted as if nothing had happened. He reassured us, saying that it was probably some wild animal that had come too close. But that same night, I again saw Alfredo sneaking out, but this time he noticed I was watching. Our eyes met for an instant, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The next morning, I decided it was time to leave. Something was very wrong in that place. I went to the car, but to my astonishment, all 4 tires were flat, and a sense of panic took hold of me. I returned to the lodge with as much calm as I could muster. I informed Mr. Alfredo about the tires. He gave me a look that mixed curiosity and something that seemed like a threat. "Don't worry, I'll get someone to fix it," he said with a forced smile. Lucas was getting more and more restless, and so was I. That night, I kept Lucas close to me the whole time. While everyone was getting ready to sleep, I started to hear footsteps approaching our tent. I opened a small tear in the canvas and saw Alfredo again leaving in the darkness, but this time he was changed. His eyes glowed in a supernatural way. I decided to follow him, leaving Lucas in the tent with a quick excuse. I was careful, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. I followed him to a deep clearing in the forest where a transformation began. Instantly, Alfredo became a werewolf, a monstrous and powerful creature. My mind raced. I needed to protect my son and get out of there as fast as possible. I ran, back to the tent, grabbed Lucas, and went to the farm's main building. Now I needed to plan our escape. When the sun finally rose, I convinced some of the other campers to help us with the car. However, Alfredo was always nearby, watching my every move. It was then that I realized he wouldn't let us leave. We were trapped there with a werewolf who now knew his secret had been discovered. My only hope was to get help from outside, but the farm was too isolated for any cell phone signal, at least at that time. It was then that, after a distraction from Alfredo, I grabbed Lucas, and we ran along a trail I already knew would lead to a road. By the grace of God, we managed to find a car on the road that gave us a ride to the city. I only went back there the next day with a tow truck. I didn't want to solve my car problem on that farm. I don't know if Mr. Alfredo harmed anyone during that time or even to this day. In fact, I never went back to that place, and I don't even know if it still functions as a farm hotel and if Alfredo is alive or dead. The only thing that matters to me is that my son and I are safe to this day. Good night. Good evening. My name is Brenner, and what I am about to narrate occurred many years ago when I was still single. I was a fisherman who enjoyed solitude and the habit of camping in the forest. On one specific night, something was about to happen that would transform my existence forever. Before midnight, while I was busy with the campfire and organizing my fishing gear, two natives suddenly appeared in the clearing. At first, their unexpected presence startled me, but I soon understood that the indigenous people were there with a precise intention. Solemnly and urgently, they tried to warn me about an imminent danger. They spoke in a peculiar language, but their gestures and facial expressions conveyed the gravity of the situation. They warned that that night in particular was risky, as a werewolf roamed the woods. Although at first I doubted the veracity of the natives' warning, I chose to remain in my camp. I was a pragmatic and skeptical individual. I didn't believe in scary legends and tales. However, as the night progressed and the full moon rose in the sky, a feeling of unease began to settle in my chest. The sounds of the forest became more mournful, and a strange impression of being watched unsettled me, until suddenly, as if materialized from the shadows, the werewolf appeared. It was a colossal and terrifying entity, half human and half wolf. Its eyes gleamed with untamed ferocity. I could barely believe what was before me. In desperation, I began to cry out for help, remembering the natives who had warned me about that risk. And as if they had heard my distressed plea, the indigenous people emerged from the shadows, ready to intervene. With skill and tenacity, the natives fought alongside me against that beast, using their spears and their mastery of the forest. They managed to weaken the creature. With a furious roar, the werewolf retreated into the depths of the forest. Hours later, the indigenous people revealed to me that that beast, in fact, was one of them, another member of their tribe, and that the task of the two was to safeguard whoever entered the forest during its metamorphosis. Since that night, I have never underestimated the power of the legends and tales that permeate the woods. I chose to abandon that reclusive existence, found a companion, and finally married, settling in the city. And these memories will accompany me until the last day of my life. Good night. My name is Josevaldo. The year was 2007. I was driving my car with my son Lucas to my rural property after receiving a phone call from my caretaker informing me that something very peculiar had attacked my animals. As we drove along that dirt road, my son Lucas watched the landscape with a certain euphoria and apprehension, eager to discover what had happened on our farm. However, my mind was filled with worries. According to the caretaker, a pig had been brutally killed. But the explanation came even before we reached the property. About 500 or 700 meters from the gate, something crossed in front of my car without me having time to hit the brakes. The vehicle shook violently. My heart pounded as I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to regain control of the car. "What was that, Dad?" Lucas asked. "I don't know, son," I replied, trying to remain calm as I peered into the darkness ahead. A feeling of dread seized me when I saw a silhouette moving in front of the car. It was corpulent, emitting a deep, menacing growl. Only then did I understand what was happening. We had collided with some kind of very large animal. Fear chilled the blood in my veins when the creature positioned itself right in front of our car. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, reflecting the headlights. That was a werewolf. The silence that hung between the two of us as we faced that beast was broken by the horrifying sound of claws scratching the car's body. The werewolf was outside, thirsty for retaliation for the hit and run. The worst was yet to come. I ordered Lucas to stay inside the vehicle with the doors locked while terror consumed me. I grabbed a machete I kept behind the driver's seat and prepared to get out and confront that beast. It was at that moment that I heard a familiar sound, coming from the direction of my property, the sound of a gunshot. I looked in the direction of the sound and saw my caretaker and friend Jose. He emerged from the shadows with his shotgun in hand. His face was grim as he approached the scene of the incident. "Jose, behind you," I yelled, pointing to the werewolf that was now preparing to attack. Jose didn't hesitate and, with impressive aim, aimed and fired, hitting the creature head-on. The thing began to howl in pain down the road as it retreated, wounded. That was our chance. I ran to the car and pulled Jose inside, locking all the doors. Jose, completely out of breath, asked if Lucas and I were okay. We were all in shock from what had just happened, but thanks to our caretaker's intervention, we were safe. As the werewolf limped away, wounded, down the dark road, I tried to start the car, and it worked, and the three of us headed to the farm. We arrived and locked ourselves in the house, and it was then that Jose explained that, from his dwelling, a small house that is almost next to the farm's headquarters, he saw my car's headlights, and noticed when I stopped. He thought something might be wrong and went there armed to check. That was our luck, mine and Lucas's. We knew that night would be a story to tell our grandchildren in the future. That thing never came back, but we cannot guarantee that it will never return. But for now, we are grateful to be alive and to have someone like Jose to protect us in times of danger. Good night. Good evening. This happened to me and my aunt between 2003 and 2004. It was a Holy Saturday, a time when the faithful followed a procession. My aunt and I went. We followed the procession, and I noticed that everything was very strange. The street dogs didn't bark. The crickets made no noise. Everything was in the most absolute and dreadful silence. I looked at the sky and saw the huge full moon, covered by some strange and eerie clouds. This gave it a sinister appearance, and in that way the moon looked like the gaze of a creature watching us, and that deeply disturbed me. But we continued in the procession. We made the deposit of Our Lady of Sorrows, prayed, and left. On the Aicheon way back, my aunt and I passed the military battalion and everything remained in absolute silence. I looked inside the battalion and felt a fear that almost paralyzed me. We continued walking, and at one point I looked at the bars again, and there stood the werewolf, very hunched, with a lot of hair on its back. It had a long snout, like a dog, but its nostrils were 2 holes. Huge teeth protruded. It always had its mouth open, but at no point did it attack me or make any move to do so. It just stared at us and let out a horrifying howl that chilled me to the bone. It turned its back on us and ran to the back of the military battalion. My aunt gave me a push that brought me back to the world because I was so startled that I went into shock. We started walking again, now very quickly, to get out of there soon. I say and repeat, it didn't want to attack us. It was just there. Days passed and my fear didn't diminish. I closed my eyes and saw the creature as if it were in front of me. A good while passed, and I suspected some people might be werewolves. So one day I decided to leave home to try and find something out. I passed by the military battalion and everything came back to my mind. I turned into a parallel street and went down one of the streets. I went to the house of one of the people I suspected. I knocked on the gate and asked the girl, "Where's Nestor?" She said he had gone out, that he would be home soon. I decided to go back, and just as I was about to turn the corner, there came Nestor. The way he walked reminded me a little of the creature's gait. I looked at his elbows and they were scraped as if he had been rubbing them on the ground for a long time, and the moment I looked into his eyes, I felt that he was the werewolf. I didn't say a single word. A glance was enough. I approached this person, talking, becoming friends, and I realized that even though he was a werewolf, he was a person with an enlightened heart. I got to know him, helped him, talked to him, gave him clothes, food, and always tried to find out if he was okay or needed anything. Sometime later he passed away, and I suffered a lot from that loss. But today I can say that I met a werewolf with a pure and enlightened heart. Good night. Good evening. In 1983, my firefighter team was called to rescue a group of campers who had gotten lost. We managed to rescue everyone alive, but at the end of the rescue, they reported having gotten lost because they had been attacked by an unknown animal. It was a group of 7 people, and none of them could describe what the animal that had attacked them really was. They said they had engaged in hand-to-hand combat with it at various points in the forest, and that the thing only didn't kill any of them because they managed to brutally wound the beast. At the end of the entire rescue, my team and I, hearing those reports, became curious and, without their knowledge, decided to investigate the forest. At some points, we found traces of blood mixed with fur, gray and some black fur. And on a certain tree, there was a claw mark, as if the creature that attacked them was going to strike one of them. Missed and ended up hitting the tree. It was simply fascinating and horrifying at the same time. If that had been a blow and had hit a human being, the person would certainly not be alive. My companions and I, despite having found several indications that there really was a beast in the forest, did not find the creature. But everything we saw was really unusual. If there is something in the middle of those bushes, it manages to hide very well and really only appears to those it wants, as if it were a kind of ghost. Good night. Hello, my name is Michael. I'm 32 years old, and what I'm about to tell happened in Strasbourg, Switzerland. The year was 2008. I recently started following the channel and decided to send my account. In December 2008, I was 16 years old. My family and I decided to spend the beginning of the school holidays in Strasbourg. We went and stayed at the house of a friend of my mother's who had just had a child, and she wanted to come along. The idea was to go camping by a nearby lake as it was winter and snowing. We thought it was a good idea, and so it was. We arrived at the lake, and it was absurdly beautiful. We fished, made a bonfire, and had a lot of fun. But when the sun began to set, we stopped fishing and went to warm up as it was very cold. That's when I started to notice something strange. There were no crickets, no frogs, or any other animals that could sing at the beginning of the night. A total silence took over the place, and that wasn't normal, as we were in a rural area. And when we started cooking the fish over the bonfire, we heard a loud roar coming from above the trees. I was very scared. My father told everyone to go to the car that was nearby. My father was also very afraid of what that creature might be. On the way to the car, the thing roared again, but this time it seemed much closer. Due to the snow on the ground, it was a little bright, and we could see the thing. It was enormous, much taller than my father and me. The thing approached the bonfire we had made. A horrendous thing. My mother's friend's daughter started crying, and the thing saw where we were. The thing started running towards us, at the same time sniffing the air and looking everywhere. It was as if there was something else there that was also attracting the thing's attention. Until, suddenly, from one of the trees, a beast similar to the one that was running towards us jumped and started a fight with that beast. That was our chance. We all ran straight to the car and managed to escape from there. Our despair was so great that we went to a police station to report what had happened. But apparently the police didn't believe our story and ended up staying quiet, thinking it was some other common animal, and that we thought it was something supernatural. But the most important thing is that we managed to get out of there alive, all of us. Even today, even being in Brazil, I refuse to walk alone or ride a motorcycle in rural areas at night, because I always think that something similar could appear at any moment. Good night.